Lisa and I have been friends for more than 40 years. We met as young mothers. We had a lot of questions and insecurities about parenting, even though we were both teachers and thought we knew a lot. But infants and toddlers were a whole new world. And in all those years, across all the conversations we've had about parenting, research, families, and what it means to try to do this as best we can, always makes us aware of an ongoing issue. How much of how we parent is actually ours? How much of it did we consciously choose? And how much of it chooses us? Have you ever wondered about this?
For example, I grew up in a family that loved me. I have no doubt about that. My parents cared deeply, they worked hard, they wanted good things for me. I also grew up in a family where certain things were simply understood. Certain rules that were never stated as rules, like children are seen but not heard. You don't make a fuss about anything, or emotions are handled privately or not at all. Then you push through and you don't ask too much because it's stated that this is the way things work in this family. No more explanations.
Yes, nobody sat me down and taught me those types of things. I just absorbed them, like the way you absorb the smells of a house you grew up in. You don't notice it until one day you're somewhere else and you realize that other homes have different smells. Funny, isn't it?
But then you have your own children, and without making any conscious decision, without intending to repeat anything, you started doing the same things. It's like an automatic response. Using the same tone when your children pushed too hard, the same discomfort when they needed something, and I didn't know quite how to give it to them. The same pull when things got messy emotionally to just move past it. All of this gets you back to what is normal.
It wasn't until I started reading about attachment and the research about developmental psychology and talking to Lisa and others who had these same questions and interests that I began to understand what was happening. We might not only be parenting our children, but we're parenting our own childhoods. Let's take a moment to digest this.
There's a term in developmental psychology for what we're describing. It's called the intergenerational transmission of attachment, and it's one of the most well-documented findings in the entire field. The idea is this: the way you were parented, the patterns of closeness or distance, of warmth or coolness, of response or dismissal, those patterns become your internal map for what relationships look like, what is normal, also what to expect and what to do when things get hard.
When you become a parent, you navigate by this map, often without knowing you're using it, often without being able to see it at all, because it's the only map you've ever had.
It's true, and this is not us saying that you were parented a certain way, therefore you will parent that way. There's nothing to be done. Research, and this is actually the hopeful part, shows something much more complex than that. The factor that matters most is not what happened to you, it's whether you have made sense of what happened to you.
Parents who have reflected on their own childhoods, who can tell a coherent story about where they came from, including the hard parts, without either dismissing them or being swallowed by them, those parents raise securely attached children, even if their own childhoods were difficult. The capacity for reflection is the turning point, not the circumstances you started from.
Which means that this conversation, this one right now, where we are asking how much of my parenting did I actually choose, is not just interesting, it is the work. Does that make sense?
We want to be careful here because this kind of conversation can very easily turn into blame or other negative emotions, or even into looking at what your parents did or deciding that they are the problem and you are the solution. So let's focus.
Most of our parents did the best they could with what they had. Most of them were also parenting from their own childhood experiences. Most of them had never been offered any other map. Back then, things were very different from today. Much more was not said or even known. Understanding where they came from is not about erasing what happened, but it's more about being able to see it clearly enough that you're not unconsciously repeating it. There's a difference between understanding and justifying yourself, and the difference is where healing and transformation live.
We talked in previous videos about specific myths. The myth of early independence, the myth that crying babies manipulate us, and the myth that closeness creates weakness. We want to touch on that today and look at where those myths come from, because they do not just appear by magic. They're mostly passed down through generations, and understanding how they're passed down is part of understanding how to stop doing so.
The myths we inherited about raising children are built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what children are. For centuries and in many cultures, still today, children have been seen as inherently selfish, inherently willful, inherently in need of being tamed, like small animals who arrive in the world oriented toward chaos and need to be shaped into civilization.
And from that starting assumption, all of the advice follows logically. If children are essentially wild and need to be managed, then you need to establish control early. Giving them what they want rewards the wildness. Holding them too much creates dependence. Responding to their crying teaches them that crying works in favor of their supposed manipulation. The whole system of advice hangs together. The problem is that the starting assumption is not true.
Children are not born bad. They're not born selfish in the same sense we mean when we use that word about adults. They're born oriented toward connection, toward love, toward the people who care for them. Yes, they're born with needs, big ones, loud ones, disruptive ones, but needs are not the same as selfishness. A hungry or frightened person is not selfish. A person who has not yet developed the capacities to regulate their own nervous system is not selfish. They are in need.
And the response to need in human beings across our entire evolutionary history has been other human beings, closeness, care, and presence. So this is simple biology. That is what we are designed to expect from our caregivers, our parents, our primary attachment figures, and without it, we are lost.
One of the most true things we have ever encountered through research and experiences in API is what the psychoanalyst Selma Freiberg called ghosts in the nursery.
The idea is that when you stand over the cradle of a newborn, when you look at this small, entirely new person, there are often others in the room, not physically, of course, but present in a way that is almost tangible. Your own mother and father appear, the memories, sometimes conscious, but not always, of how you were held or not held, how your crying was met or not, what happened when you needed something that was given or not, what happened to you.
The ghosts whisper, and if we don't learn to recognize their voices, we can mistake them for our own. Common beliefs like, as parents, we know what's best, that might not be your belief. That might be your grandmother's belief, passed through your mother, arriving in your mouth as if it were yours. He needs to toughen up. That might not be your instinct. That might be what was said to you at an age when you were too small to argue with it. And it went in and it stayed.
Dr. Freiberg also wrote about the opposite, about what some researchers have called the angels in the nursery. The moments of genuine tenderness that were given to us, even in difficult childhoods. The grandmother who always had an extra hour only for us. The teacher who noticed something that no one else seemed to care about. The neighbor who said, "You're going to be okay," at a moment when you really needed encouragement. We carry painful things, but we also carry the good things, and both are available to us as parents. Both are part of the map we inherited.
Part of the work of conscious parenting is learning to tell them apart, learning to ask, is this what I believe, or is this a ghost? Is this something I have chosen, or is something I absorbed before I was old enough to choose? These are important questions to ask ourselves.
We want to share something personal here because we think it matters to be specific and not just talk about this in the abstract.
Now, there was a period in my life when my children were small, maybe 4 and 8, and when I noticed I was very uncomfortable with anger, with their anger. When they got angry, something internal automatically wanted them to stop immediately at that very moment. There were several occasions when I only tried to calm down the tension, but then I realized that it was because somewhere in my body, anger felt dangerous.
And where did that come from?
Exactly. I became aware of this and I went back to my childhood moments where anger, certain kinds of anger from certain people meant things were about to get very bad. I had learned from a very young age that anger was something to manage, to push away as quickly as possible. And so when my children got angry, my instinct was to shut them down. Not exactly because that was the right response for them, but because it had once been the necessary response to my own situation.
That is a clear ghost. It is exactly what a ghost looks like. A response that was formed in one context, in one childhood, arriving in a completely different situation and running on automatic.
Yes, I didn't see that for a long time, and when I finally did, I was able to begin to do something different. I could sit with my child's anger instead of rushing to stop it. I was even able to say to them, I can see you're angry, and that is okay. Can you tell me why? And then something in both of us felt at ease.
Let us be honest about something, because the phrase breaking the cycle gets used a lot, and it can sound like it's something you just decide to do. Like you read something or hear something and you think, right, I'm going to parent differently, and then you just do so. It doesn't work like that.
No. Breaking a generational pattern usually requires 3 things, and they don't happen on a weekend. They happen over years, sometimes over a lifetime.
The first one is awareness. You have to be able to see the pattern, name it, and decide, this is what was done, and this is how it affected me, and I can see that I'm doing some version of it now. That sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things a human being can do because the patterns are invisible to us exactly because they're ours. They feel like reality, not a choice.
The second one is making sense of it, not excusing it, not minimizing what was painful, but being able to hold our own experience and the struggles of the people who caused the pattern at the same time. This is different from forgiveness, which is another thing and completely personal. Making sense of it just means that you can understand something about why that happened, even if what happened was not okay. It's where you can become empathic with your parents and see them as those real human beings who are also parenting their own childhoods.
And the third one is support. The one we thankfully received through La Leche League and the dear friends that became our extended families. You cannot break a generational cycle alone. It's very deep, old, and too automatic. You need other people, like friends who know you well enough to reflect things back, or partners willing to do the same work alongside you, therapists and educators who can help you see what you cannot see on your own. Communities, like the one we're creating here, where people are working through the same struggles and are willing to be honest about it.
This is one of the reasons why we started Attachment Parenting International 30 years ago, mostly because we did not have it figured out, and we realized that nobody else around us did either. And that was the point. We needed to do this together.
Something that has been central to our work, part of which we share in our book, Criar con el corazón, and something we believe deeply, is that children are not small adults who were born into the world, wired for bad behavior, needing to be punished into goodness. They are human beings who arrive in the world hardwired for love, connection, and people who care for them.
Yes, every child has the capacity for both goodness and difficulty. We're not saying children are perfect or that they don't need guidance. They absolutely do, but they lean toward goodness naturally when they feel safe, seen, and when they trust the people around them. They want to cooperate. They want to please. They want to be part of a loving bond.
The behavior that looks like defiance, the tantrums, the refusing, the no, no, no of a 2-year-old, that is not malicious intent breaking through. That is a developing mind and body that cannot yet do what we're asking it to do. That is a small person who is overwhelmed or hungry or frightened or simply does not yet have the neurological equipment to manage this moment. That's what we mean by empathy, not sympathy, not feeling sorry for someone from a distance. Empathy is actually putting yourself inside their shoes, feeling what they feel as best you can, and responding from that place. Empathy is not something you teach children by explaining it to them. It is something they learn by experiencing it, by having it done for them over and over until they internalize the capacity to do the same. Show empathy for others.
The most empathetic adults we know were raised by people who were empathetic toward them, deeply enough that their empathy felt like a natural response to another person's pain, rather than something they had to force themselves to do.
And the least empathic adults, the ones who seem to genuinely not register that other people have feelings, were often the children whose feelings were not acknowledged, whose distress was ignored. They learn slowly and without knowing it that feelings are inconvenient things to be handled. What they experienced we see in their behavior as adults, and it happens so consistently that it matters enormously. We want to speak directly to parents whose toddlers seem to be testing every boundary, who say, "I hate you" in moments of rage. They've not turned against you. They are developing. And development is messy and loud, and sometimes looks like the opposite of what you hope for. But underneath the mess, the need for connection is still there. It does not go away at 2 or 6 or 14. It just changes shape.
So your role is not to break their will. Your purpose is to stay in relationship with them through every stage of it, to be the one who remains after the hard moments, repairs after the ruptures, and keeps showing up. That constancy, more than any specific method, more than any particular discipline strategy, is what they will carry.
We've been doing this work for 30 years now. We've sat with thousands of families, watched children grow up and become parents themselves. We watched some of those second-generation children, the ones raised by parents who were trying consciously to do something different and becoming extraordinary adults. And we've also watched families struggle, seen cycles that were supposed to end continue into the next generation despite everyone's best intentions.
What 30 years teaches us is humility. It teaches us that this is hard, that good intentions are necessary but not sufficient, that information helps but doesn't solve everything, that the most loving parents in the world can still have hard days, and that hard days don't undo the love.
It also teaches us what actually moves the needle, and what moves the needle more than anything else is not a perfect parenting technique. It's the quality of the relationship, the consistency of the presence, the willingness after every hard moment to go back.
Parents are not expected to be perfect. We've never believed that. We have met loving, trying, sometimes failing, always coming back parents, and we have watched those parents raise remarkable children. Because children are forgiving in a way that is almost incomprehensible. They want a relationship. They're built to keep reaching for it even after disappointment, and they need us to keep reaching back.
And every time we do, we gain a better understanding of who they are and what they learn about how adults handle their own mistakes. Apologizing to our children is ultimately the most honest modeling of strength we can offer them.
There is a fear that sits underneath all of these conversations. That fear fuels these questions. What if I'm already too much like my parents? What if the patterns are already in my children? What if it's too late?
We have heard these questions 100 different times, and we want to answer as directly as we honestly can. It is not too late, ever.
The brain is not fixed, neither in children nor adults. The capacity for new patterns, new responses, new ways of being in a relationship never shuts down. It slows with age, but it never disappears. Children whose parents change, who suddenly have a parent who's more present, more reflective, more willing to repair, those children change too. The relationship and the patterns shift.
It's not a quick process, nor is it without effort. It brings a sense of mourning for the years that were harder than they needed to be. But the shift happens. We've watched it happen. We've been a part of families where everything changed, the transformation held, and the next generation got something genuinely different.
You don't need to have been a perfect parent from the start to be a different parent from this moment on. The only thing required is that you keep trying, and that in the moments when you stumble, you go back.
All of this lives in our book, Criar con el corazón, and this Spanish edition is one we are so excited about because the Spanish-speaking world has an incredibly rich, deep sense of community and a family-centered approach to parenting. This book is organized around 8 principles, a compass for those moments when you're unsure which way to go. It serves as an anchor to help you ground yourself and return to what matters most when everything feels overwhelming. The book is available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback formats.
If you've been watching these videos and have found something useful in them, if something we said made you stop and think, made you feel less alone, gave you the words for something you felt but could never name, then this book offers so much more, a lot more.
We want to close today with something simple. The fact that you're here, that you watched this and stayed until the very end, means that the questions already living inside you, like, how can I improve, or how can I do this better, are already the beginning of something different.
Remember that you're not defined by what was done to you. You are shaped by it, yes. It's in you, in ways you can see, in ways you probably cannot see yet. But the capacity to look at it honestly, to name it, sit with it, and choose something different, that capacity is also within you. And that capacity is the most important thing you can pass on.
Your children will not remember everything you did right. They'll not be able to list your successes at bedtime. What they will carry, what goes into them and stays, is how it felt to be with you. That is what we hope for you. Not perfection, just being the one that was always there as a safe harbor.
Thank you for being here. We're so glad we found each other in the vast digital world. We'll explore further in future videos.